It's every day, day in and day out. We are helping families that unfortunately did not plan in advance and were caught off guard after a long term care issue turned into a crisis. And there's different types of crises that we can face in life. There can be a health crisis or there can be a financial crisis. But when it's a long term care crisis, it really is that perfect storm that, if it's not handled properly, can cause the most stress and devastation for the family and the finances. We try every day to help families to plan in advance, but it doesn't always happen. And sooner or later, that crisis will strike. So let's talk about what to do if that crisis actually does strike. All right. So we'll get started with the presentation. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again, folks. All right. Screen share is loading. Good. Now, I messed this up the first time I did this a couple months ago. So again, if I could just get some thumbs up that you can actually see the title screen to our presentation, then I'll get started and I won't have to worry about anything. All right, good. Thank you. All right, good, good. Let me just make sure. Thank you again. All right, so what we're talking about here is what happens when all of the planning and protection that can occur didn't occur, and the family is now dealing with a situation that they weren't prepared for. All right. We're going to start off by actually defining what is a crisis. Okay. And the crisis is, we know it inside because we've all felt it, but technically it's a time of intense difficulty or danger. And as we all know, it can be extremely stressful. As I tell my clients, in a time of crisis, the stress increases, the costs with whatever you're doing increase, the time needed to get things done also increases, but unfortunately, the options that are available to us decrease. Okay. And the reality of it is that most folks don't plan for a crisis. Okay. We can see signs and maybe we know we should be doing something, but the reality is that when it hits, it will probably be the worst time and it will catch you off guard. Now, there are a handful of risky situations that exist in life, period, but we should plan for them. And long term care is one of them. Okay. I just need to adjust my screen a little bit. Okay. So, what exactly is a long term care crisis? Well, there's different types, as I've shared. There can be a healthcare crisis and there can be a financial crisis. But as I said in the introduction, if it's a long term care crisis, it's an intersection of the two most stressful events, your health or the health of a loved one, and the reality that a lot of money is needed to help cope with the problem. And it's also knowing that it isn't necessarily ending right away. Long term care can be needed for years. So the stress will build because the health can deteriorate and the costs can escalate. All right. And it can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars over a few years. The focus of today's webinar is on the financial aspect of this long term care crisis. So we're going to focus on that. But first, how much can long-term care in general cost? Why is it even a financial crisis at all? So let me show you that. Primarily, it depends on where you receive it, and those three locations have different levels of cost. So first, home care can be received within your home. And in that situation, a personal care aide can come in. You'd be looking at about $22 to $30 an hour to pay for an aide to come in and help mom or dad or your loved one with the activities of daily living, walking, bathing, toileting, dressing, and the like. Okay, that's to stay at home. On a daily level, you can be looking at about $280 to up to almost $400 a day to pay for that in-home care, depending on how many hours and the level of care that's needed. And monthly, yes, that adds up. Of course, it compounds. $8,400 up to $11,700, and we've even seen higher on a home care setting. So yes, that's expensive. The second place where long-term care can be received is going to be in an assisted living. All right. In an assisted living, you're looking at monthly care, roughly $5,000 up to $9,000 a month. That's just room and board. Okay. Annually, you're looking at $60 to almost $110,000 a month for assisted living care. And guess what? The care goes on top of that. Assisted living, again, is room and board. There's different levels of care that the assisted living may require you to purchase, or you might have to bring in your own aide to assist with those activities of daily living again. So you'd add together the first screen and this one. Then you have what's called a skilled nursing facility or the nursing home. $475 a day up to $650 per day. Monthly, the facilities in the New York area, $14,000 up to about $20,000 a month. And of course, annually, you're looking at about $168,000 to around $240,000 a year. So if long-term care is needed and there's no planning and nothing is being done, then these are the costs you're going to get hit with. So yes, that's stressful. It all adds up really quick. And when it starts to add up, even after a couple months with these kind of numbers, it can really deplete a family's savings for sure. So what is a person to do? Well, a typical family would engage us to help them work through the legal, the financial, and the care issues. Here we focus on legal for asset and income protection. We focus on the financial aspect for Medicaid eligibility and for the Medicaid application. And we focus on the care, making sure that wherever your loved one is, they're getting the best care possible through assessments, intervention, coordination, and advocacy. All right. So that's the type of work we do every single day. The bottom line is we'd be obtaining Medicaid to pay for the care. All right. It is entirely doable, and we do it every day. But it's a heck of a lot easier said than done. Okay. So we do get Medicaid to pay, and Medicaid eligibility is based on three things. It's based on your assets, it's based on the income of the applicant, and it's based on the care. All right. That's what Medicaid is going to look at to determine eligibility. And we'll be spending the rest of our time talking about the first one, the asset side of eligibility. Okay. So what is the total amount of assets that a Medicaid applicant can have in their name? And that number is $15,750. Okay. That's not income. That's not annual anything. That is money in the bank. Okay. 15,750 is the maximum an applicant can have. We always have our clients have less because you don't want to be too close to the number in case you go over, and that can present other problems. Now, in addition to the $15,000 number, and you'll find I do like to use round numbers. So in addition to the $15,000 number, an applicant can have their retirement accounts. Okay. So if there's a $50,000 IRA or a $400,000 401k, that's exempt from Medicaid eligibility, provided that the person is taking their what Medicaid calls periodic payments, or what we typically call your required minimum distributions. Sometimes those minimum distributions are increased to be maximized, as it's called. But again, the IRA account, retirement account, is exempt as long as those annual distributions are coming in. Now, the trade-off is Medicaid lets you keep the account because they're going to count the income in that category, which we're not going to really get into today. But again, you can keep the retirement account. In addition, a client, an advocate, can keep their home. And I probably get this question 2-3 times a month because we focus on protecting a person's home. It's a very important step to take. But they've heard through the grapevine, through the neighbor, through an online website, that isn't the house exempt? And the answer 100% is yes. The house is exempt from Medicaid eligibility for the application. However, if you're living in that house, again, it's exempt while you're living there, or your spouse is living there, or a disabled child is living there. But in the future, if you move out to an assisted living or a nursing home, or if you pass away and your spouse isn't there either, or the disabled child, then that house is vacant. And when a house is vacant, Medicaid goes after it. They can put a lien on it during your lifetime, or they can recover against your home after you pass away. So, yes, the house is allowed to be kept, but we don't want it in the applicant's name because Medicaid will go after it later. Okay. Um, Now, what if the client has more than the $15,750? What does she do? Well, she has to get below the 15,000. That's what the application eligibility requirements are. It's how that happens, how the person gets below the 15 grand that makes all the difference. All right. And bottom line is they have to do one of two things. They either have to spend it or they have to transfer it or gift it. Okay. Those are the two options. If you got $100,000, you either have to spend it down to the 15 or give it or transfer it away. All right. And there's good ways and bad ways of doing that. And we're going to focus on the ways of transferring and gifting so that we can focus on protecting. Okay. Now, historically, what we're going to be talking about was always the way to protect assets in the nursing home Medicaid context. But, and this is crucial, come October 1st of this year, what we're going to talk about now, look back periods and penalties, that will now apply as of October for home care as well. Okay. So I felt it important to do this topic because it's no longer just nursing home, it's nursing home and home care in a couple of months. All right. So remember that what we have to deal with is this concept of a look back period and a penalty. Now, let me get into that a little bit. So, Medicaid, part of Medicaid's job and part of our job before even submitting the application is to make sure the person is financially eligible for the Medicaid benefits. And again, typically nursing home, you have a 60-month look back period. And come October 1st, you will have a 30-month look back period for home care. So, what does the look back period mean? Well, it's where Medicaid is reviewing literally every financial statement that the person of every account that the person, the applicant has had over the last 50 or forgive me, 60 months or 30 months. All right. So the look back period is a review of all the financial accounts. Why? Because they want to know what you did with the money. What have you done? What asset protection steps? What gifts have you made during the look back period? Why? So that they can penalize you. All right. The purpose of the look back period is to see whether you've made yourself eligible within the look back period. And if you have, then there will be a penalty. The penalty is a period of time. All right. And again, using a rough number, a round number, for every $13,400, all right, 13 grand, for every $13,000 that is gifted or transferred to or during the look back period will result in 1 month in which Medicaid will not pay for the care. Okay. So a quick example is if an applicant gave $130,000 to their healthy child, that $130,000 gift during the look back period will be found on the bank records. A formula will be performed, meaning 130,000 divided by that $13,000 divisor will end up with the number 10. That is 10 months in which Medicaid will not pay for the care. Just nursing home for now, but after October, also applying to home care. So look back period is crucial because it results in penalties. Okay. So if a gift or transfer, to summarize, is made during that look back period, it'll be subject to the penalty. And then what happens during the penalty is the family has to pay for the care themselves during that period of time. So the best thing to do in a crisis, after, of course, finding an experienced, certified elder law attorney to help, is to look for what's called exempt transfers. Exempt transfers are exempt from the penalties. Okay, so let me explain that while I get a sip of water here. Again, if an asset is or an account is transferred during the look back, we'll end up with a penalty unless it's an exempt transfer. These are the exempt transfer rules for Medicaid applications. Any transfer between spouses, even during the look back period, will not be penalized. Okay. Any transfer to a disabled child or to a trust for their benefit will not be penalized. Any transfer to a what's called a sole benefit trust, which is for the benefit of a disabled person under 65 years of age, again, no penalty, even if done during the look back period. Okay. Now, the house is very unique. Okay. So if the house is transferred into an irrevocable trust, okay, which is a very common technique, and the person applies for nursing home Medicaid, that will always be penalized because it happened during the look back period. It's an asset with value, and an irrevocable trust is not an exempt recipient, okay? Now, under home care, under the home care situation, currently before October, there's no penalties, there's no look back period. So it's never been an issue. The wrinkle is this: come October, with the new look back period and penalties for home care, the law still says there's no penalties for home care when you're transferring the house. So there's a gray area there, and we'll have to see how the new law rolls out, how it's implemented, because the hope is even in a home care Medicaid application after October, when we have the look back, that an asset, that a house transfer to a child under certain circumstances, but most likely to an irrevocable trust, would be exempt, okay, from any type of penalty. That's the hope, and that's the wrinkle that's out there. Now, an exempt transfer of the house that will never be penalized, even in a nursing home, is if you transferred the house, not only, of course, to the spouse or the situations above, but if you transfer it to what's called a sibling with an equity interest, meaning if you live with a brother or sister and they've been helping maintain and pay the bills for years, okay? Another circumstance in which the house transfer would never be penalized, including a nursing home, is if the house is transferred to somebody called a caregiver child. It has to be a biological child that has lived in the house with the parent for at least 2 years and provided some level of care to keep them home versus the nursing home. Okay, so that's an exempt transfer from penalties as well. In addition to those black and white, all right, exempt transfers, other arguments can be made if a gift was made during the penalty period. For example, an applicant can say that they intended to sell the property for fair market value, okay, but they got less than fair market value. That's not necessarily their fault, so perhaps no penalty would be imposed. This one is used not always successfully, but it is a good argument that the assets were transferred for purposes other than to qualify for Medicaid. What that means is if mom and dad gave $10,000 to every child at Christmas time for the last 20 years, then if they did that during the look back period, it shouldn't be penalized because it's something they've always done, and it wasn't done for protection purposes because they knew they were going to need Medicaid. All right. So you just need that history in order for it to be a successful argument. And finally, it's what we call a gift back. So if mom gives her son $40,000, but then needs the care sooner than she realized, and that $40,000 is discovered during the look back period, if the son gives the $40,000 back, again, it's called a gift back, and the penalty is erased. Okay, so that is also successful as long as the son didn't spend the money renovating the bathroom or taking the family to Disney. All right. So again, these are exempt transfers. How to protect the assets in a crisis. If you have these scenarios, this is where we look first. Okay, but if you don't have any of these scenarios, if it's not possible for an exempt transfer, or if it's not the best idea, all right, you don't have to undertake this. But then again, like I said in the beginning, in a crisis, our options narrow, and then we're left with, if you don't use these, what's called a promissory note strategy, which is an attempt, it's a strategy to shelter a portion of the assets and to spend a portion of the assets, which is a heck of a lot worse than spending it all. Okay, so the promissory note, let's get into that, and we're going to do it with an example. Okay, so again, this is the asset protection strategy in a crisis. We've been doing it for nursing homes for the last 14 years. We're going to start doing it for home care as of October, probably. All right. So let's look at Mr. Smith. And let's say he needs care. He has a house valued at $300,000 and he has $100,000 in cash. Okay. Assuming a nursing home setting, and again, home care come October. Now, the promissory note strategy can be complicated. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. But bottom line, if there's too many assets, too much owned by the applicant, and there's no exempt transfers, this is our avenue to pursue. Okay. There's a lot of different variables that come to bear on a couple different calculations. So the goal, as I go through this, is really to share the concept, all right, in case it arises for you or for a loved one. All right. Now, what we're going to do, actually, I'll get rid of that for a second, is we're going to make an assumption that the house, as I was trying to explain on the last side, can be an exempt transfer if we put it into an irrevocable trust on the home care side. Okay. But for this example, we're going to focus on the cash. All right. Now, here we have $100,000 in a savings account. Recall, Mr. Smith is allowed to have that $15,750. Let's just round it down to $15,000. Although in practicality, we'd have him much lower than that, but $15,000 is what we're going to allocate there. In addition, there are certain exempt expenditures, okay? Prepaying funeral expenses, 100% allowed in a crisis situation applying for Medicaid. So are legal fees, all right? So let's just assume that's a $20,000 cost between those two, all right? That leaves us with a $65,000 balance to protect, all right? Now, the promissory note hopefully comes into play here. And I say hopefully because not everybody knows about a promissory note, and not every nursing home admissions office is telling families to go shelter money with an attorney. So again, the purpose of these webinars is to share that information for you to share it with others so that we can help more families to protect their assets, okay? But let's assume that you do seek us out, and we're going to use and recommend the promissory note strategy. Now, again, there are some unknowns with the upcoming home care law, okay? But we'll just go through the example as best we can. And again, we're going to assume this is a home care case. I think I said nursing home, but let's pretend the example for Mr. Smith is all home care, all right? Now, if we have this $65,000 remaining, we have to assume, for the example, a cost of care. That's how much is the family paying now, or what do we expect the costs to be in the future? Let's assume that number is $8,000. In addition, Mr. Smith gets a $1,000 monthly income, and we have what's called the regional rate of care, $13,407. Again, on the last slide, I was explaining that $13,000 number. That's the number used by us and by Medicaid to determine the length of the penalty. You take the amount of the gift, divide it by that 13 number, and you get the number of months in which Medicaid's not going to pay, okay? So we calculate a gift amount. That's the first step. How much can we try to protect? And we have software to help us get this done, and good old calculators and pencils. But we have to start somewhere. So usually it's a 50% number. With a promissory note strategy, we try to shelter 50%. We did our numbers here, and it actually comes down to $42,000 is how much we'd be able to protect. All right. Now, $42,000 would actually draw a penalty of 3 months. That's the $42,000 gift divided by that $13,000 number gives you a 3-month penalty. 42,000 divided by 13,000. Okay. Now that leaves Mr. Smith with $23,000. Okay. However, that $23,000 cannot remain in Mr. Smith's name because of the maximum of $15,000, which we've already accounted for. He's already holding that. So we need to get the penalty started. So how do we do that? If Mr. Smith gifts the $23,000 to get him below the 15, that will draw more of a penalty. That doesn't work. All right. So what he has to do is he has to loan the other $23,000 pursuant to what's called a DRA compliant, federally compliant promissory note. All right. With a 3-month term. Now, what that means is $42,000 is gifted and protected, and then $23,000 is loaned under this promissory note. It can go to the same child, to a different child, to a neighbor, but this is how it works. All right. The promissory note will require 3 monthly payments. It's a 3-month note. And when you divide it up, it's about $7,600 per month for 3 months. Now, for Mr. Smith, the care costs $8,000 a month, but he gets $1,000 in Social Security. So the $7,600 promissory note that comes in goes towards the cost of care, as does about $400 of his income to pay for the $8,000. All right. Now, that is how we pay for the care for 3 months. At the end of the 3-month promissory note period, the note is over, the penalty should be over, and Mr. Smith should be eligible for Medicaid in month 4. All right? Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, write your question in the comment box or put the question in the question box, and I'll deal with it as soon as we finish up here. Okay? So in a promissory note strategy, used in a crisis when there's too much money and care is needed, we can save about $42,000 in a home care setting, spend about $23,000, and get Medicaid to start paying in month 4. If we are talking about a nursing home, the cost of care can be $15,000 or $18,000. So the numbers will be different. Every scenario, again, a lot of variables, the cost of care, the amount of income that can be contributed, the cost of the facility, all of that comes to bear on this type of a calculation. Okay. Now, now that we know how to do it or what to do if we're faced with a crisis, again, the best thing to do is in a crisis, reach out to an experienced, certified elder law attorney. This is what we do. It's why we're here. It's what we do every day. But the best way to do it, other than that, is to avoid the crisis altogether. And the way you do that, and I'm sure you've realized it already, is to plan and protect in advance of the crisis ever happening. Okay. The way we do that here at Tully Law is we implement what's called an elder care protection plan. That is meant for folks that are about 65 and above and that have assets to protect, and they're looking forward. They're looking ahead and saying, I may need long-term care. Let me put together a plan. Let me protect my assets. Let me set up an estate plan for distribution after I'm gone. Let me incorporate incapacity planning so I have the right durable modified power of attorney. I've got a healthcare proxy so that my financial and my healthcare decisions can be made. And we've got the asset protection going. What does that mean? That means we get the look back period running, 30 months for home care, 60 months for nursing home care, and go on and live your life. Live in that house, go on your vacation, spend time with the family. And again, live through the look back period. And hopefully that happens because you've done it early enough in advance. And then after the look back period, everything that's in that trust is already protected. So the crisis is completely minimized. Okay. So the elder care protection plan, asset protection, incapacity planning, and importantly, preparing for care. That's what we help folks do when we're not actually pursuing Medicaid and advocating for the care needs. We're helping them prepare for it. And this is how you do it. All right. Bottom line again, avoid the crisis. Don't wait to the last minute. All right. We've been doing this. Okay. We've been doing Zoom calls, Zoom consultations. You know, the pandemic that we've been living through. These have been strange times. All right. We've seen families go through some horrible situations with their healthcare and their finances. It's time to protect. If it is on the late side for you, still we can help. We can implement exempt transfers. We can implement a promissory note. If you're in need of home care at this point, now is the time. We're running out of time for that October deadline. All right. So we can have a Zoom or a FaceTime conference call. And Brian at tullyelderlaw.com, or the phone number, give us a call, 631 424 2800, 424 2800. And for those on the phone, Brian, Brian, at Tully, Tully, elderlaw.com. If you have questions, I'm going to go answer those right now. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and shoot me an email about a topic. All right. And I'll try to answer it or do a whole webinar on it for you. All right. So let's see if we have any questions. Come on. Here we go. Let me look around here some more. Okay. So question is it going to be an exempt transfer, or can we argue an exempt transfer if mom gave us money just for the last 2 years, but now needs Medicaid? That's the summary of the question. The reality is that it's an argument, and arguments may not work. All right. When you're dealing with Medicaid, and the reality is that you might have to come up with evidence and establish. But when you're dealing with an argument like this, we may end up with a fair hearing, which is an appeal in the world of Medicaid. And then it's up to a judge to decide. So it's an argument, but we can't guarantee a success with it, unfortunately. The longer that type of a pattern happens, the stronger the argument is. Okay. Now, what if, okay, good question. What if somebody establishes the elder care protection plan we were just talking about? They do the irrevocable trust, but then they need the care. All right, that's a good point, and it does happen occasionally. So the plan is get the protection done, then live out the look back period. All right. If you need nursing home care or home care during that window, how do we address it? Well, it depends when in the look back period that care is needed. I'll give you a nursing home example. So if we have a 5-year look back for nursing home care and care is needed in year 4, we almost made the 5 years. So what we would probably do if there's sufficient funds or other assets, retirement accounts preferably, is that we'd recommend the family actually pay for the care to finish up the 5 years. And then the 5 years passes, the assets in the trust are protected. Okay. However, if care is needed during, let's say, year 2, we still have 3 years to go in the look back period. So we may have to go back and, believe it or not, revisit the plan and revoke the trust. Yes, even though it's an irrevocable trust, we can revoke it under the certain circumstances. And we would then look at spousal transfers, if there's exempt transfers, if there's a spouse to gain Medicaid eligibility, or any other exempt transfers, or we may end up in that promissory note that we just went through. All right. I don't see any other questions. We did pretty good on time today. So thank you very much. And again, I look forward to hearing from you. And take care. Be well and stay safe. Bye-bye.